thanks, Tom, for meeting with us today. And for all those that don't know, Tom Hufty, Dr. Tom Hufty is the pastor at First Baptist Church of Maryville. And I was very moved by one of your sermons several years ago. And it was this, when you discussed the 7 criteria for decision making. And it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, my wife had to make a decision. And she chose to go to move from public school to private and start teaching at First Baptist Church through Maryville Christian. Mm-hmm. And you know, I don't want to fool the surprise, but one of the decisions was you know, just reminding yourself of the biblical purposes and finding scripture. And when your son wakes up quoting scripture and he's not really into quoting scripture, we knew that we made a right decision. So without much ado, you know, Tom, take it away.
Okay, well, I was scared you were going to blame me for that decision that she made.
No, it was a good decision.
It was a great decision. It was great for us anyway. We're glad that she made that decision because she's making a difference in a lot of kids' lives and touching a day that she'll never see. And so that's really exciting. I think to start off, I want to remember the context that we're in, and that we're in the middle of the COVID-19 situation, and where do we go from here? And one of the things that I really believe is that your decisions determine your direction, and your direction determines your destiny. And that's why decisions are so important. And we all make decisions in different ways. Using a metaphor of a fire, you know, when the house is going up in flames, the time for decisions is typically fast, and the priorities are to save people and limit damage and put out the fire. And it might be now that some people feel like that they're going through a fire right now with, you know, the loss of jobs and everyone being in home together, and the pressure cooker that sometimes can develop. So today, as we're talking about refreshing ourselves, I think by learning or relearning how to implement crisis tactics that should be put into place before the next fire starts, I think one way to do this is to reassess how we make decisions. And I guess maybe my first question would be like a self-evaluation question, and that would be, have you ever made a bad decision? Because I think all of us have. I ran across some bad decisions that I wanted to share with you here. This came from a David Frost, Michael Deacon book that was a collection of truly bad decisions from the field of politics, sports, business, science, show business, every part of life. Okay, so let me just read a couple of them to you. Sam Phillips owned a small recording company in Memphis, Tennessee, and in 1955 he sold it to RCA Records for the sum of $35,000 and the exclusive contract he had with a young man named Elvis Presley. Okay, this is where the sign comes up and says bad decision, because this is like a loss of billions of dollars. You know, I mean, there were billions of records. Okay, here's another one. In 1889, the edition of San Francisco Examiner published one article by Rudyard Kipling, but declined to accept any more, saying, "I'm sorry, Mr. Kipling, but you just don't know how to use the English language." Here's another one. 1938, Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel sold all rights to the comic strip character Superman for $135 to the publisher. $65 a piece. I mean, bad decision. There's several. In 1898, young Albert Einstein applied for admission to the Munich Technical Institute, but was turned down on the grounds that he, quote, showed no promise as a student. So, I mean, you could go on, and you could put, you know, I could add my name to that list as well, because I have been a bad decision maker in my early years. And just to give you one example of a bad decision that I made, my wife and I had been married for, well, first of all, let me give some context to this, okay? The context is the 80s, okay? So if you remember the 80s, you might be too young, but
yeah, it's a little bit too it's getting close, you know.
Yeah, okay. Well, in the 80s, Barry Manilow was the man. All right,
Yeah.
love songs. Barry Manilow. I mean, he wrote the songs. I need to get my laugh track out here. I've got an app so that whenever I have to speak into without an audience, you know, you just hit the laugh track.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'll throw that out once in a while. So anyway, Barry Manilow, he was a musician. Obviously, played a grand piano. Was a white grand piano on a turnstile. And back in that day, I had a little music ability, and so I was playing the piano, and I would sing his songs, and I would try to sing like him, you know. And Manilow had the mullet, and I had the mullet, and so I get married in 1980, and my wife Rhonda and we've been married for about 6 months, and we're just hanging out in a shopping area, and there's this music store, and we go into this music store, and they have this grand white piano on a turnstile, just like Manilow. All right, and so I look at it, and I'm just enamored by this. I'm in my early 20s, and I'm thinking, wow, this is so cool. And this salesman comes up to me and he says, hey, why don't you sit down and play it? So I sat down and I started a Manilow tune. And the salesperson said, man, you sound just like him. And see, I believe this. Okay. so long story short, probably about an hour later, my young wife of 6 months and I are walking across the parking lot, leaving that store, making a verbal commitment to buy this white grand piano. And I said to her, she's kind of uncharacteristically quiet at the moment, and I said to her, how do you feel? And she said one word, sick. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, Tom, did you ever stop to think that we live in a small 2-bedroom upstairs apartment with a winding staircase? How will we even get it there? Where are we going to put it? It won't fit. And it was at that moment that I knew I had a problem. I can't make good decisions. I don't know how to make good decisions. And at that moment, we both decided that, first of all, we needed to communicate more, but we also decided that we needed a system by which we could make decisions that are productive decisions and not decisions that are going to really end up destroying us. Because remember, decisions determine your direction, and direction determines your destiny, but decisions can also destroy you. And so that's my personal story. And I know different people, you know, I have different ways. We're all wired differently, and they have different ways of making decisions. And so some people are very impulsive, which I was very impulsive at the time. Some people are very contemplative. My wife is very contemplative. And so when you are faced with a decision, the question is an impulsive person, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to make a decision, and if it's the wrong decision, they'll turn around and make another decision. And if that's the wrong decision, they'll turn around and make another decision. And lots of times people follow bad decisions by another bad decision, by another bad decision. And then they wonder why their life turns out to be so messed up. And so I believe that there are places for impulsive decisions, but those impulsive decisions, you can be impulsive, I think, when you're not going to cause any pain to you or to others, and it's not going to have any lasting consequences, but be contemplative about everything else. I remember when my son went off to college, we were talking about decisions, and that was the one thing that I mentioned to him. You know, you're going to have fun at school, but you're going to make decisions during this time that really can set your life in concrete. And so be contemplative about those decisions. You know, there are other decisions that you can be impulsive by, but you can only be impulsive about decisions that won't cause any pain, that aren't going to cause any pain to you or others, and they're not going to have lasting consequences. So what we decided to do is put together this little outline. Now, this outline, Todd's going to be a little bit different than what I shared with you years ago in that sermon that you heard, but nevertheless, I think that's going to be helpful. And here's the other thing: every point that I make here, all of these have to be yes. Okay, I have to answer yes to all of these. The other thing about this is, and this goes to my background. Okay, in my background, every one of these is biblical. All right, so I'm taking my cues from the Bible when I share these. So anyway, just wanted to give that context and be fair enough with that. The first criteria, the first element of this is conviction within. Say you're faced with a decision, and you know, we have all kinds of decisions that we have to make. I believe these are true from where I'm going to go to school, to who I'm going to marry, to what career I'm going to choose. We all have these decisions, and then we have decisions within those decisions. But if you're making a decision, for example, on making a move of one sort or another, the first thing that I consider is the conviction within. And what do I mean by conviction within? What is it that moves you? That would be a question to answer to figure out what your conviction within is. What is something you would do even if you never got paid for it? Wherever you landed, you'd have to do this thing. Whatever your answer is, that's called your passion. And I remember years ago, I asked a mentor of mine, because he'd been around me a lot, and I'd never done anything on passions and deep convictions. And I just asked him, I said, what do you see as my passion? And he made this statement. He said, Tom, I think you have a passion to communicate truth to an audience. Now, no one had ever said that to me. No one had ever written that out. I'd never read that phrase in a book. But when he said that, a light went on. And I thought, that's exactly what my deepest conviction, or one of my deepest conviction, is as far as how I want to use my life. So the conviction within, if you're making a decision, I think it has to be consistent with the way you're wired and how you're being nudged with that conviction within. There's a difference between a conviction within and a desire from without. A desire from without is, I see that Corvette, I really have a conviction within to have that Corvette. Well, that's probably not a conviction within. That's probably a desire from without, because what I want to do, I want to look good to everybody else. It's an image thing or whatever. And so that's a desire from without. But a conviction within is an inside job. That's more internal. So do I have a conviction, for example, making a job change or whatever? Do I have a conviction within that this is a direction I should go? And once again, there's some discerning that needs to go into that. But to follow that is number 2 criteria, and that is circumstances without. If I have a conviction within, say I have this nudge that I really think that we ought to do this in our company, or we ought to go implement this program, because I have this conviction within, this nudge. What about the circumstances without? I need to get the facts. Are there outside circumstances that are lining up with the inside conviction? Say you really want a new job, but no one's asking you to do an interview. You might have a desire for a new job, but the circumstances without are not lining up with that desire, you see? And so the conviction within, if you have that, and the answer is yes, this is definitely conviction within. Now I've got these circumstances lining up without, because I have 2 or 3 job offers here. So some circumstances are lining up without. Now here's the thing. Remember, the answer has to be yes to all of these before we move forward. So I have this nudge, this conviction within. I notice that some circumstances on the outside are lining up with the inside conviction. So what do I do next? Well, I get counsel. Number 3 is I get counsel from others. I ask for advice. And the question there is, as you think about asking for advice, who do you ask for advice? Who do you get counsel from? Let me give you a criteria that I have for people that I ask for counsel from. There's basically 3 criteria. Number 1 is, for me, they love God. Number 2, they love me. And number 3, they have some sort of expertise in the area that I'm thinking about making this decision. That's helpful as well. But I want to ask people that have no agenda other than to help me. I pick people that when I need to know, when I'm facing a decision, I pick people to counsel me that are going to want what's best for me, and have the courage to say, Tom, I just don't see that. I don't see that lining up with you. I had the opportunity to make a move several years ago. It was in 1998, and I was making a move from a metropolitan area to a more small town, rural area, from the area of ministry to the area of education, and it was going to be a big change, not only for me but for my family. And I had another guy who wanted me to be involved in an international nonprofit where we travel a lot, do a lot of mission work and stuff like that. And so I was contemplating the education possibility. I was still happy where I was. Yet this guy was a friend of mine that wanted me to go with him, do international work. And so I was just really struggling with, I had the conviction within that it was that there was something else, that there was another chapter for me to open. The circumstances from without were lining up. And so then I went to the counsel of others, and I started talking to people about this job of the education job. And here's the other thing about the counsel of others. The counsel needs to be consistent. Say you pick 3 or 4 or 5 people. They want what's best for you. They have a little expertise in that area, and their counsel is consistent. Then those 3 criteria mean a lot to me. That's kind of checking the box, yes. Because it's interesting. I went to the guy who was trying to get me to go in the international nonprofit, and I said, hey, listen, I've got this offer at this university, and I just wanted to throw it out to you. And I'm thinking, if anybody's going to say no, he's going to say no, because he wants me to come work with him, right? And you know what he said to me? I can't think of anything better for our organization than for you to work at a university and get students to go with us. And that wasn't what I expected at all, but yet it started making sense. And then the counsel was consistent. So I've got this nudge within, this conviction within. It's being aligned with circumstances from the outside, and the consistent counsel is, or the counsel that I'm getting from others is consistent. So criteria number 4 is to calculate the cost. Every decision has a price tag. It will cost you something. It'll cost you time. It'll cost you money. It'll cost you energy. It'll affect your reputation. It'll cost you your talents. It'll cost you resources. I mean, there's also the moral question. Will this cost me my integrity if I make this decision? Will I have regrets as a result of this decision? Every decision costs something. And when people pressure you to make a decision, it's okay to say, I'll get back with you. I mean, that's what I should have done with the piano. I should have said, I'll get back with you. I've used this phrase as I've matured a little bit, and I still have a lot of maturing to do, but as I've matured a little bit, one of the phrases that I've learned to say is, after I've given this some more thought, that keeps you from being impulsive, and give it some thought, but count the cost, because every decision is going to have some sort of cost to it. So does this make sense, or am I trying to make something happen that I want? And counting the cost and calculating the cost will help clear that up a little bit. And then the next thing is, are you not the next thing, but still under counting the cost? Are you willing to pay that price tag? Are you willing to pay the energy? Are you willing to make the financial investment? Are you willing to expend whatever you need to get the resources to make this happen? And calculate the cost. When I made this decision to go to make the move from ministry to education, everything lined up. All these 7 steps lined up. But there was one thing that I was really concerned about, and that was the financial piece, because I was going to be taking a cut in pay, and a significant cut in pay to take this position. And all of these lined up, and so I had to implement that into the cost, because that was going to be a cost. I'll get back. That's my cliffhanger. I'll get back to you on that when we get to the last part of it. Here's number 5. Number 5 is consider the problems. You have to prepare for problems, because there's always going to be some problems. And you have to think ahead in making this decision. Okay, I've got this conviction within. It's aligned with the circumstances without. I've talked to people that know me and love me and want what's best for me, and they're all aligned. And I'm willing to move forward, because I know the cost that it's going to be. So I'm going to be willing to take care of those costs. Consider the problems. There's going to be obstacles that will come along the way. So when I made the move from ministry to education, we're committed to go. We've gone through the 7 steps. We're committed to go. I get an email from one of my subordinates. I was going in at a vice president level. And I get an email from a lady that I don't know, who is going to be one of my people that I supervise. And this is how the email went. Dear Tom, first line, nobody here knows why you're coming. Next line, watch your back. Next line, nobody understands why the president wants you to come, but whatever the president wants, he can do whatever he wants. Stay, you connect with the students and they'll love you, but there have been people that have worked here for 20 years that aren't coming in at your level. So watch out. This was my welcome letter.
Yeah.
I mean, we're almost on the road. It was like a couple of days before. And I remember Rhonda saying to me, are you sure this is, and we've already gone through our 7, this is not a baby grand piano. I mean, we've already gone through all of our 7 decision-making criteria.
And piano versus a big decision like that.
Oh, huge.
You've committed to it. So.
Right. So anyway, there was other things that took place when I got there. The first thing I did was I went to every vice president's office, shook their hands, introduced myself, and told them how honored I was that I was getting to be able to get to work with them, and if any way I could do to help them. I was just trying to dispel any kind of thing. So that letter actually, even though it was a negative letter, it actually helped me. I mean, this was gold. Now I can go in and I know what the turf is like. So, but there's always going to be problems. So consider the problems. Number 6 can kind of go along with number 5, and that is confront your fears. Face your fears and realize that if they're there, they need to be dealt with. And don't think that you have to be perfect. Perfectionism paralyzes potential. And so I believe that there's not going to be perfect conditions wherever you go. Or whatever you do, and the decision, there's going to be problems that'll come up, but those problems are designed, I believe, not to wreck you, but to refine you. And so when that happens, I think that you just confront those fears. Now, in my world, and what I believe by my authority is that fear is something that can be very irrational. And so, where I've learned over the years, and this goes back to my personal faith, and that is when I sense fear popping up, that just means I need to trust more. And the bigger I make the fear, the smaller I make my faith. But the bigger I make my faith, the smaller my fear becomes. And so if I maximize, once again, speaking from my world, if I maximize my faith, I'm going to minimize my fear. And then the last thing would be commit to a decision. And I believe that you have to pay attention to timing here, and circumstances can dictate the timing of the decision, because I believe there's a right decision to make, but there's also a right time to make the decision. And that's the challenge that a lot of impulsive people have, is that I want it and I want it now. And unfortunately, a lot of young people and millennials that have come into, and I don't want to overgeneralize the millennial generation, because I've got a lot of millennials that work with me and I love them and they're great. But lots of times they were raised without knowing what life is like without a microwave. They've always had that. Everything has always been instant. And so lots of times we have people that are just impulsive, that they expect things to happen now, and why shouldn't I have this now? And the problem with that mindset is there's a value in the process of getting whatever you're trying to get or going for. There's sometimes more value in the process than there is in achieving the goal. And so I think that getting back to circle back to finish up that story. So I make the move and I'm taking like a 50% cut in salary. This is where the faith thing comes in. And it's a strong element for me because, as a kid, I was raised in the church, in a little small country church, and we'd have missionaries that would come in, and they would tell all these stories about how they sold everything and they went off to some foreign country and God provided. And I'd sit back there and I'd say, yeah, that's great. Yay, God, but now we're talking to me. Okay. And I've got a family and I've got bills and
you've got 2 kids.
And I've got 2 kids and they have this habit of eating, it's just, it was something that, do I really believe this or do I not believe this? And so all the 7 things had lined out, but there's always going to be, and I found this in major decisions like this, there's always going to be an element of faith, or there's going to be an element of risk. And the element of risk and the size of that risk is determined by the size of your faith, I think. And so that's just been my own personal experience. So that's the 7 criteria. Like I said, it's a little bit different than how I presented it years ago when you first heard it, Todd, but still a lot of the same content.
No, I really like your discussion over passion. Anytime I'm making a hiring decision, I always ask them, if there's nothing else you could be doing, what should you do, or what's your passion? What are you comfortable doing?
Yeah.
And you can really tell a difference between somebody that gives you a generic answer and somebody that is just passionate. They say,
right.
And I use an example. I was doing an interview for attorneys, and I was looking for an estate planning attorney. And I sat down and went to the person and said, what are you passionate about? And they said, trademarks. I said, really? Okay. And I was so taken by that statement, and it still aligned with us, that I was like, no matter what, she's coming into our organization, and I ended up hiring her. So, but and we now we can offer something, offer trademarks, but but you could tell that she was just so passionate. When you get passionate, you get very glowing about that, and you just get so excited about that passion. So that one alone, you've got to have passion for the decision. So yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Well, thanks. I think that for me, I'd been asked what my passion was before this happened. That's why I started asking people to kind of evaluate me at that point, because it wasn't a multiple choice that, you open up a book and you could pick from these passions. It really had to be uniquely articulated. And so when he made that statement, and he knew me really well, and he made that statement, I think you have a passion to communicate truth to an audience. I started thinking, man, he's right. I mean, if I lost my job tomorrow, I'd figure out a way somehow to get a platform to communicate truth to people. I mean, Todd, the reason I'm here today, the reason I'm on this webinar is because you asked, and I thought that aligns completely with my passion. Now, I'm not an expert by any means. I've made a lot of bad decisions. I mean, I've only told you what I could tell you in 30 minutes, but we could go all day on the bad decisions I made. But the things that I've learned from that, who knows if that can be helpful to someone else along the line. And so if that is great, I mean, if that works, that's great. So
you talked about impulsivity. How is there any criteria to rein that back in? Because I know, sometimes, especially in these circumstances that we're seeing today, when information is given to you at a moment's notice, and we have to make all these decisions, and sometimes even critical decisions quickly, how can we, is there a condensed, is there a way that we can condense it, or is it, how do we resolve that scenario? And
well, if someone is impulsive by nature, they need to be slowed down. If someone is analytical by nature, sometimes they need to speed up. And so I think that when somebody is impulsive, and for me, what the light that went on was when I walked out of there and my wife was not for the decision. I was kind of wondering how we were going to get the money to work. But I was impulsive about what I wanted, but then I could feel the pain of, oh no, what have I done? In fact, I called a lawyer. What do you do when you're impulsive? You call a lawyer. Help me get out of this. I had a friend that was a lawyer, and I called him, and he said, did you sign anything? And I said, no. He said, you're good. And I said, well, it's my integrity. I feel bad. He said, just go back and say, listen, after further thought, I made a mistake, and which I did. And that was another thing, which is another part of a personality. You have to be able to admit that you're wrong. Mm-hmm. But I think that in this setting where we want quick fixes, everybody wants to, let's get back, let's open up our country, let's open up our states. I mean, I was telling Rhonda this morning, I need a haircut. We heard on the Today Show that Georgia opened up. Maybe I can drive to Georgia and get a haircut, and obviously that would be an impulsive move to make. But I think overcoming impulsivity, some of that is a maturity issue. It was for me. But then I still have impulsive traits, but now I can think through those a little bit better. And part of it is I married an analyzer. And so in marrying an analyzer, that helps you think through things more. And so I think that's part of it. And I think also that sometimes you don't learn anything unless you're burned by it. Mm-hmm. And but if you're training people to not be impulsive, I think you also need to get back to your values. Is this decision in keeping with our values, or are we trying to make something happen here? And I think you have to be aligned with your values. Anyway.
And anybody that's in attendance, if you have any questions, feel free to post those. So by all means, and I'll ask the questions for you. So if you have anything, do you have anything, Teresa, you want to add, or?
Yeah, I just think, why people maybe are typing or formulating the questions. I definitely want to thank you, Dr. Tom, for kicking off this webinar series and great selection, for starting, because maybe some people who joined in are wondering, why exactly are we talking about this 7 criteria? Well, obviously with where all of the business owners are right now, they're trying to make decisions. Some of them are going to decide, are they going to come back or not?
Right.
Do it, how, or if they make the decision, yeah, okay, what are the steps, and do I need help, in order to do that? But one of the things that talked about, like many reasons why you might reach out and work with a consultant or coach, and one of them is you've lost that love and feeling about your job. So it's that passion, right?
Yeah.
That passion, you had that passion when you went out and started. And somewhere, it became, oh, well, I thought this was going to be fun, and I did this because I like whatever the activity is or product service I'm offering. But
Sure.
gosh, I didn't know about all the other stuff, and the passion kind of, just kind of drained over time. So, how can we take this, look at this now, use the great criteria that you have provided, and evaluate this, and see, is this passion going to come back up, inside of us to go, or, as Todd's going to talk about next week, should we stay or should we go now?
Yeah.
Tough, right?
Tough. Yeah, right. Tough questions that people are facing. I think the passion doesn't go away. I think it gets rekindled sometimes. But I don't think, I think if you're passionate about something, I think you're probably always going to be passionate about that. I just kind of think you're wired that way. Now, the passion could be reconfigured, and could be that some businesses, small businesses that they started out of a passion.
Yeah.
And then this hit, and the financial aspect of it has changed exactly changed what their dream was. Mm-hmm. However, it hadn't changed their passion. And so they've got to figure out through some decision making of how to maybe reset, using your terms, how we can reset what's going to look like. And I believe leaders have to be visionaries. They have to have a clear mental image of a preferable future. And but in order to do that, they're going to have some skills in not necessarily taking bad news to heart, but taking bad news and saying, okay, how can I use this bad news and still fulfill my passion? For example, when I got that letter saying nobody knows, it's like the world's against you. Okay, well, I took that as that's a love note, that I've got to now go and show some love to some people, and pave the way so that I can fulfill my passion. So I think that difficult circumstances like this, they can either stretch us or they can strangle us. And I think that we really need to look at this as, okay, how am I being stretched here? I mean, we operate, sharing with Todd, since this coronavirus hit and gathering of people together has been limited to 10 people, that changes everything for us. And so we just have to learn how to communicate differently. We have to up our relationships because that's vital to us. We have to be innovative. And so actually, I think I took the acrostic of crisis and just listed the different things that we need to do.
That was great. I enjoyed that.
Oh, okay. Well, good. And so I think that, there's those who have a passion are going to find a way for their passion to be fulfilled. And I just want to encourage anybody who might come across this that don't give up. It just might look different than maybe what you thought, but that might be better, So.
We don't have our cheesecake. So,
I'm
Now, are
missing
you-
out on that one.
Todd,
But it
Todd,
sounds good.
Todd is the best cheesemaker in the world. He puts Cheesecake Factory to shame. So is mine to be delivered today?
sure.
Yeah, right,
It's in the mail.
right.
Well, you know, with the corona, our baking has condensed.
Has
So,
it? Now, you know what? That's kind of a passion of yours, though, isn't it?
sure.
Okay, all right. It went too far.
No,
That was purely manipulative.
no, I've been asked, is that a passion of yours? And I don't mind doing it, but if I were to make that into a business, I would not like it.
Yeah,
And I think that's the difference. Passionate about doing something. I think that's kind of good. Segue in from our conversation. Just because you're passionate about it, can it make it into a business?
right.
So, when I've evaluated, because we even have a name for it, it's Mrs. Sivia's Sweets. And, we've looked at it, and I don't want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do all the baking. That's just not,
Right.
that doesn't get me excited.
Right.
So,
Right.
Doing it for people and doing it as a just for individual, that's great, but you get to a larger context, it's a little bit different.
Let me ask you this: does that release pressure for you?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of pressure on people during the season that we're in with the COVID-19, and I think that different people need releases to release pressure. And unfortunately, we see a lot of domestic violence going on during this time because, they release pressure in a negative sort of way. But I think that we all can have pressure in our jobs and pressure in changes and pressure in the loss of a job, and I think that there has to be healthy ways of releasing that pressure. For some, it's cooking a cheesecake, make a cheesecake, and for others, it's playing golf, and they can't do that now. But just getting outside and recreating is so important. So I digress, but still just trying to manipulate you for more cheesecake.
Yeah.
Great.
So, all right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. So, you got anything else, Teresa?
I don't think so. I think, like I said, it's a great kickoff. So look forward to, those of you who are now watching now or will watch on the replay to check out the rest of the series. That we'll see. Kenrick is going to be talking tomorrow, right?
Kenrick's talking tomorrow. So
okay, 8 to 9 tomorrow, and then next week I'll start on Tuesday. You'll be on Wednesday, and then we'll have more
on Thursday.
On Thursday. So we've got at least 3 or 4 weeks more of this, and so we're happy for all of you who are joining us. I'm totally excited to be partnering with Todd, so thank you very much for that opportunity. And take this time to ask the questions of all the experts that you're going to be seeing on during this, or we'll have contact information, emails, and so forth that if you think of something afterwards that you can contact.
Yep, absolutely.
You all are so kind, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you, Tom. We really appreciate you coming in at 8 o'clock and giving us an opportunity to listen to you, and we really enjoy you being our first person to kick this off. So
thanks so much. I'm honored to be a part of it. I really am.
All right.
Thanks. Take care then.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.